Hello everybody and welcome to Review Reviews, back with more Hong Kong content. Today we're doing a triple bill review. That's right, 3 film reviews for Ringo Lam's Fire Trilogy. We're doing City on Fire, we're doing Prison on Fire and School on Fire. I watched all 3 of these films sort of back to back in the past couple of days. This is a continuation and exploring Ringo Lam as a director, as a writer, as a kind of filmographer, and explore more of his films, mainly his Hong Kong cinema kind of projects, being the fact I kind of watched mainly his kind of Van Damme movies. I had to do a previous video called Exploring Ringo Lam, and I talked about some Van Damme movies and talked about Wild Search. And this is like a natural continuation, but exploring what kind of put his name on the map. Of course, he did a few films before these movies, but these are the kind of 3 main films that kind of really springboarded him into his kind of fame and fortune and made his kind of name a household name in kind of Hong Kong cinema and kind of Western audiences. Everyone knows who Ringo Lam is. There's been so many directors over the years that have inspired and influenced by Ringo Lam's work. Well, I've said before in previous videos, the 80s were a fantastic time for a lot of these directors, with John Woo, Wong Kar-wai kind of thing, Johnny To. Incredible directors that are really kind of exploring and flexing their muscles, not just within action and character performances, but also just sharing their kind of visions and sharing their stories and really going for it and not being worried too much about kind of fitting into a certain kind of box. And yeah, some work, some don't. Some are glorious in kind of nature, some are just kind of mediocre, and it's fantastic for me to explore these movies. There's so many movies yet I've still to watch from a lot of these directors, and especially Ringo Lam, that it's great to kind of get a sense of who he is as a director, as a writer, and how he kind of operates these kind of movies. And I'm going to give it right now, I'm going to say it right now, Ringo Lam is the king of slow burner. And not to say slow burner is a bad thing or kind of a negative kind of thing towards the director. I think, slow burner dramas or thrillers or whatever you want to kind of call them are really interesting. I really like them if they're handled correctly, if they got the right amount of escalation, if they got the right amount of kind of progression in the story or the characters, or if they got nice little attention moments. If the story's engaging enough for the viewer, a slow burner can really set your edge on tone, and especially make a lot more scenes like action moments or violent moments or kind of a death a lot more impactful, a lot more surprising. And I think I've seen about 8 movies of Ringo Lam now, and I think I've got a good sense of who he is. He likes to do slow burn movies, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think in some instances he does get a bit carried away. I think he kind of loses track of where the story's going, or the film kind of comes to a complete halt. He always has a fantastic kind of start, a middle he kind of struggles with, and then kind of the good stuff is towards the 3rd act. It's just the middle part that's kind of a bit of a slog to get through, and I think it's a real shame. The middle should never be a slog, it should never be a kind of, a dragging point for the film. It should all be, it's a point of escalation. So without further ado, let's dive into Ringo Lam's Fire Trilogy.
Hello, I'm Ringo Lam.
First up in this unofficial trilogy we have is City on Fire. This is the Hong Kong Legends DVD. Thankfully the transfer is pretty solid and it's got the original kind of subtitles and Cantonese kind of language, which is fantastic. Released in 1987, this was a year after Chung Yun-fat did A Better Tomorrow, which kind of kick-started this kind of like hero kind of bloodshed kind of movies, and really kind of escalated kind of lineup of movies about kind of brotherhood and kind of cops and robbers and kind of gangsters and triads, and a lot of kind of springboarding movies from kind of Better Tomorrow onwards kind of thing. Obviously there was films before that, but this was definitely part of that kind of trend, and Chung Yun-fat definitely was in the centre of a lot of these movies, and I don't blame him, to be perfectly honest, because he really is a fantastic actor. It's interesting to kind of see him in this role again. After I've watched Bulletproof Monk recently, it's nice to see him back in a proper Hong Kong movie, proper performance, really kind of giving it all in terms of comedy, in terms of emotion, action. A really fantastic character as well. I'm going to say straight away, City on Fire is fantastic. I really loved it. I thought it was a great movie. And yes, finally, a Ringo Lam movie that I think was above board than the typical other ones I've seen. I really wasn't a fan of Wild Search. I had talked about that in the previous video. As I mentioned in kind of my intro, a lot of these movies, and all 3 of these movies, are slow burners. And Ringo Lam, I'm declaring now, is the king of slow burn. And like I said, that's perfectly fine, nothing wrong with that, but you got to make it interesting. You got to make you got to have a character that kind of, you know, ties it all together, has, you know, the glue to kind of piece all these kind of sub-stories and these kind of escalations and the drama and the action, the emotion. And City on Fire does a really fantastic job. It's like, what, a 90-minute film, and it has a lot of story to tell. It has a lot of kind of sub-stories going on, you know, and this character Chung Yun-fat plays is in the centre of all of it, and he is really fantastic in the film. He definitely has a lot of range, and you can definitely tell he's bringing a lot of his kind of comedic chops to the kind of the character. The story for City on Fire basically follows Chung Yun-fat's character. He's an undercover cop. He's been doing it for many years now. He's kind of getting fed up. He's getting tired. He's kind of like, you know, been a bit war scarred by the events of the previous kind of case he was on. He kind of, you know, let his friend kind of die in the process of this kind of giant raid. And he's someone who's getting a little bit too close to these kind of, you know, robbers. He's kind of understanding them. He's kind of influencing them a little bit kind of thing. And he's attaching himself in terms of friendships to them. And he doesn't want to go for that again. He felt like, you know, he betrayed his friend, even though he was assigned to kind of bring down that kind of, you know, that group, that kind of gangs. And, you know, he's kind of done, and, you know, he can't tell his fiance about what he does, and that's causing some frictions in his kind of life in terms of how he wants to get married. And he's just kind of being fed up with being the pawn of everyone else's game. Torn between two different captains, a character called Uncle, which is kind of like the liaison to someone who's kind of helping him maintain his identity and his undercover status. Someone who's giving him the resources and the intel and giving him the cases to kind of work the undercover kind of, you know, crime scene that's going on at the moment. You've got an up-and-coming kind of captain, Inspector John Chang, played by Roy Chung, who is someone who's in all three of these movies, who plays the kind of like basically the prick in all three of these films. He gets slowly worse in all three of these kind of films, but he plays a really fantastic role in the film. He's someone who's, you know, very, very young, very ambitious, someone who's very arrogant, someone who wants to create a new task force, who wants to take out these kind of robber characters, these kind of criminals that have been going around kind of stealing kind of, you know, jewelry stores and kind of banks. And one of the kind of the recent scenes has escalated to a death. A cop has been killed, and it's got personal, it's got more serious, and he's come in to basically step on kind of Uncle's toes and basically mess up the kind of operations going on. Uncle's got different plans. He wants kind of Chung Yun-fat's character to go undercover with this kind of, you know, these robber characters and basically find where they're going to rob and where they're going to be and all that kind of stuff. This film is classic kind of cops versus robbers, old school kind of 80s kind of, you know, attitude. You've got the saxophone kind of playing in the background. You've got a very stylistic, stylized kind of camera work in places. Very much a Lethal Weapon kind of influence in terms of the music choices, in terms of locations. I think the camera work is really top notch in this film. I love his choice of kind of handheld kind of shaky camera work to kind of nice kind of wide scope kind of work as well. He definitely plays with the camera a lot more in this, and it allows the film to create tension. I love his sense of kind of daytime and nighttime within this kind of little small city he's kind of filming it. The bright colours and the lights and the kind of scenery, authentic and kind of, you know, rich, and it kind of, you can feel it kind of thing within your kind of fingertips. I didn't realise watching the film that City on Fire is a Christmas film. Yay! We're going into Christmas from next week, and I just managed to watch a Hong Kong Christmas movie. Yes! There's a scene towards the kind of the third act where kind of there's office parties and there's Christmas music, and even the car chase sequence towards the end as well, when they're on escape from the cops, is playing sort of Christmas type music, and there's kind of like lights going in the background. There's no kind of Christmas tree or a kind of obvious kind of decoration, but I can definitely tell they wanted to go for that kind of Christmas kind of feel. It's almost like Lethal Weapon was a Christmas movie, so they wanted to kind of, you know, cash in a little bit on that kind of idea. But yeah, nice to have a Hong Kong thriller Christmas movie. Fantastic. The film is really fun to watch. It's both a kind of intense kind of thriller, a bit of a comedy, a bit of a kind of love story in places. It's a bit of everything. It kind of throws in a lot of different kind of like subgenres, enough to kind of make everyone a little bit happy. And surprisingly, most of the film is actually focused on Chung Yun-fat's character for a portion of it. The first two acts are very much heavily focusing on him and his relationships with his girlfriend and the kind of the two police officer characters kind of thing. They're going back and forth, you know, butting heads. You find out more about the robbers within the kind of the third act of the film. You kind of establish them in the first act and kind of who they are, how they operate. One of the things I thought was absolutely fantastic in the film was the action set pieces. It's very few and far between. There's not many in the film, but when it does, it really does benefit the story. This is a good example of the action serving alongside the story, and when you get this big epic moment, especially kind of thing when the robbers are first kind of escaping in their kind of first sequence, it's really crazy how insane that kind of action scene is. Like, you know, cars are flipping and, you know, blowing up kind of thing, and fire broken everywhere, characters get injured, there's this fantastic sense of gunplay. It goes really bonkers towards the third act of the film as well, when shit hits the fan between the classic cops versus robbers. There's a lot of kind of body counts, a lot of death, really kind of escalation kind of, you know, scenes, which I think is fantastic. Definitely well earned, definitely well kind of placed to really kind of bump up the film. Surprisingly, you don't know much about the robber characters until about the kind of third act of the film. You manage to infiltrate the actual gang itself. It takes a little while for that kind of to play out. He's someone who is kind of supplying guns. He's someone who's kind of like, you know, getting a feel for them and trying to earn their trust, and while dealing with everything else going on in the film. The film is surprisingly funny also. I think that's down to the kind of the chemistry, kind of, you know, Chung Fat's character kind of plays. He definitely is very kind of outgoing and very kind of wacky and kind of plays. He's definitely a little bit unbalanced, maybe a little bit. I had a little bit of kind of light-hearted delight to the film. I love his interactions with his girlfriend, and even with his kind of co-star in the film, the kind of main kind of character from the kind of, you know, robbers, played by Danny Lee, who also is in The Killer, a co-star in The Killer. So it's nice to see this kind of two have a reunion and kind of have natural chemistry towards each other, and they definitely really get to know each other towards the third act of the film, and they very much confide with each other, and they tell each other a lot of personal stuff between what's going on in their lives and why they do the things they do, and why he hates cops, and why he kind of he wants to kind of, you know, marry his girlfriend. And I like the kind of the conversations and the dialogue bouncing between those two, and obviously it leads to kind of that third act kind of confrontation and that finale, which I think is absolutely fantastic and definitely really hits hard, and I think it's quite emotional, definitely for sure, and I really liked the payoff of that. I think nice to have just enough time between these kind of two co-stars to really kind of develop a kind of friendship, and, you know, I love the fact that kind of one's throwing a burger on his face and one's splashing kind of drink on his face, and just having that kind of natural kind of back and forth really suits the characters really well, and I think it's really fun, and definitely brought that A game to The Killer. Overall, City on Fire really kind of delivers what I wanted from Ringo Lam in the first place. After watching so many movies of him and kind of going back and forth on, you know, some of his movies I liked and don't like, and some ideas I really enjoy but wish they would look better, this film I think really kind of capitalizes exactly what I want from Ringo Lam. A slow burn thriller that has enough kind of tension, comedic elements, you know, engagement in terms of the main character that really kind of holds everything together. There's so many kind of sub-stories and kind of back and forths going on between the villain characters and the kind of the police force, and he's a character stuck in the middle that's just trying to do his job, trying to get out of doing this job, and he kind of wants to marry his girlfriend. I really love how the film kind of is paced. I think it's really nice. I like the escalation. I love the action. I think the action really serves the story really well. I think it's really like kind of big budget and crazy, especially towards the kind of the third act, which goes completely bonkers, and great music, great soundtrack, great camera work. Really fun film to watch. Definitely would own this on Blu-ray. Hopefully it gets a proper like 4K transfer Blu-ray release. That would be fantastic. City on Fire is for the win, for sure. Next up in this unofficial trilogy we have is Prison on Fire, released in 1987, the same year as City on Fire. Both these kind of films back to back. One thing I mentioned in my previous videos is that I absolutely find it fascinating that a lot of these actors and directors are doing multiple kind of films at the same time. I love the story with Jackie Chan. He said he was doing kind of police story while doing Heart of the Dragon, and being injured in one set and that would affect him on another set. It's just absolutely crazy and mind-blowing. Prison on Fire follows our main protagonist character, played by Tony Lee Young, who has gone to prison for manslaughter, for defending his wife, his kind of family against a robbery, which led to a kind of an accidental death, and he's gone to do prison for basically 2-year sentence in this kind of like, you know, Hong Kong Chinese kind of prison, and he's kind of meeting a variety of different characters from friends and enemies and foes and guards, and the day-to-day kind of operations of prison life. And basically this film is an hour and 40-minute film experience of a character that has gone from an ordinary citizen to being a very different kind of character towards the end of the film, and his kind of experience and his kind of friendships and enemies he's kind of gained during the course of the film. And this film is very much a drama. I don't know how it was marketed in terms of the trailer. Very different film compared to City on Fire. City on Fire is very much a kind of a pressure cooker. This film is straight up a drama. There is a little bit of action places in terms of like fight sequences, tension film moments that's kind of sprinkled on the film, but in the heart of it, it is a friendship between Tony Leung's character and Chung Fat's character. He's a bit of a comedian, he's a bit of a jokester. He kind of compares himself as a monkey and him as a lamb, and this is a zoo and everyone's here has got like lions and tigers and elephants, and he's the bottom of the food chain and he's just there to survive. And you follow the character throughout the film and how he kind of progresses between kind of going very closed off and very kind of, you know, anxious and scared to someone who's a bit of a fighter, who gets a bit brave, gets a bit daring, who gets a bit angry in places. And I really like his friendship and his bond between him and Chung Fat's character. They definitely feel like natural kindred spirits, almost like brother figures in a sense, and they really help each other get through this kind of really tough time. And you've kind of got this kind of beef going on with kind of a character called Mickey, someone who is very much a snitch and someone who very much is a very dishonorable kind of tryout kind of gang leader in this kind of prison, and he's kind of blaming everyone else. He's blaming our main protagonist character for a lot of things going on because he's the new guy, and he's kind of showing strength and basically wants to take him out, and it kind of leads to kind of a few escalated kind of moments around the film. I would say the film is pretty enjoyable. It's pretty solid. It's a slow burner. Ringo Lam is the slow burner king now, as I've already mentioned. I think the kind of scenery and the kind of look of the film in terms of the way it's in the prison and how they kind of eat and how they sleep and how they kind of interact with each other and how they kind of, how the guards are a bit shady themselves and how you get these kind of trial leaders that are kind of landing kind of turf and kind of like getting people's business. I think all of it kind of adds to kind of like the interest and the intrigue of the kind of like the drama that's happening. Well, on top of that, you get a kind of brotherhood kind of friendship between Tony Lee Young's character and Chung Yun-fat's character, and they really play off each other really well, and I think it's a really nice kind of friendship, and they definitely kind of help each other at the tight spot. It kind of reminds me a lot of Shawshank Redemption, which is kind of the obvious example, between kind of like Andy's character and Red and how they kind of interact, and obviously very much, and it's funny enough because Chung Yun-fat's character is very much a guy who gets things kind of thing. He can get cookies and kind of like magazines, get cigarettes, and he's the guy that's, you've got connections, he's got a wife and a family that he really wants to get back to, and he's kind of like struggling for the first portion of the film, and he definitely gets tougher and gets stronger and adapts to the kind of prison life. Find out a lot about Chung Yun-fat's character as well, who's someone who's just a bit of a lifer in prison, someone who's kind of like been through it all and made a few mistakes, and he wants to do right by his son. We've got quite a few returning actors also in the film, which is fantastic to see. Roy Chung, who's also playing a much more of a meaner character in this film, is a bit of a prick in the kind of City on Fire, someone who's kind of young, ambitious, and just kind of full of shit and taking credit for a lot going on. This time he's playing a much more of an aggressive, by the book kind of sergeant officer kind of thing, who's just really fed up of these kind of like these inmates, and he's kind of playing them off each other, and he's making deals, and someone who's very dishonorable and very sleazy and kind of dishonest and very much kind of like don't give a shit kind of thing. I quite like that. He plays a really good role. I think they mentioned in the film that he did get jumped at some point during kind of his past, and he got a scar on his face. That's why he's kind of like much more aggressive and more mean to the prisoners. And his character's really in everyone's beef and really on everyone's kind of stepping on everyone's toes and causing drama and causing trouble, and doesn't like the fact he kind of gets called out by his superiors in a lot of sequence, and that really escalates the kind of the third act of the film and really kind of butts heads a little bit with a few people. Great character, great performer by Roy Chung for sure. We also have CFA Chan, who's also playing another kind of recurring character in the kind of these unofficial trilogy. He played one of the robber characters in the first movie. He plays a kind of like a smaller role in this film. He's part of the kind of Mickey's kind of gang leader kind of turf, and he also plays a much bigger part within School on Fire as well. Also, we have Kwon Lee Wong, who plays another recurring kind of actor who keeps going back in these kind of movies. He played a detective, kind of police officer character in this one. He plays the secondary kind of tryout kind of leader, who in this film someone going against Mickey remains mostly neutral apart from the kind of our main kind of villain characters and the guards. So a great performance by him, and also plays another character within School on Fire. So a nice recurring kind of actor yet again. So yeah, Prison on Fire, a really solid, well kind of put together kind of drama. It's a little slow in places, a little bit kind of where's the film kind of going kind of feel towards it. It's definitely nowhere near as bad as some of the other movies I've seen in kind of, not just in Hong Kong cinema, but in slow burn films in general. It definitely has a nice kind of aesthetic towards it with the prison environments. I like the day-to-day operations. I like the interaction between the two trial leaders going on and the kind of the guards, and being very scheming and very kind of dishonorable, and just the kind of the life of a 2-year sentence within this kind of main character and the character that he's going through. He's going through his kind of really tough times of being kind of humiliated and being mocked and made to scrub that floor extra again and again, and almost killing himself in one scene, to going towards a kind of very nice, kind of fun, kind of nice heartwarming kind of friendship and brotherhood kind of bond between Chung Yun-fat's character. Definitely escalates towards the kind of second and third act with this kind of food strike and a really kind of bonkers kind of all-act fight sequence and all that kind of stuff towards the third act. I won't reveal too much, but it's very satisfying. It's very well put together. I think the pacing is just nice enough. The cinematography in this time around is very much kind of very still. It's very kind of like shot by shot kind of thing, but that's fine because it is a prison. It isn't meant to be this kind of like joyful kind of happy kind of place. It is very much a kind of a scene by scene. There isn't much score in place either kind of thing. There's not much soundtrack. That I noticed. It's very much a still, quiet film. It adds to the kind of the prison kind of experience, I guess, towards it. So yeah, Prison on Fire, a really well done prison drama, that has just enough in there to kind of, you know, make an enjoyable film for 90 minutes. I love the bond between these two. I love the character interactions. I think the villain characters are quite cool as well. I like how much depth they have. I like the kind of different locations within the prison that we see, from the laundry room to the prison cells to the hospital, that kind of stuff. It definitely has enough going on between Chung Yun-fat's character beef and you know, Roy Chung's character. Yeah, Prison on Fire definitely was a lot more enjoyable and delivered a lot more than I thought it would do. Great characters, great aesthetic, and you know, just a great kind of movie experience overall. And lastly, we have this School on Fire, released in 1988. This is the final of the kind of Ringo Lam Fire Trilogy he did. He did a few more kind of Fire movies after. School on Fire is very much a different film compared to the first two movies. It's very much a different type of feel, and it's definitely got a more of a kind of a Johnny To kind of PTU type of a kind of atmosphere, kind of aesthetic towards it. You know, that film focuses on 3 different types of police force units within one night, and how they kind of, how corruptible they are, and how they're dealing with kind of the gangs territories going on. This film very much divides this kind of small little town. It's very much corruptible, kind of like a little city area that basically all these students are going to school, going to, you know, get education. The film has this constant message of, you know, study well, be better, be good kind of thing, and you know, do well, kind of like that kind of idea. And these students are going to school, they're going to get an education, and it's the idea of the building being kind of a safe haven for the outside world of this kind of tryout war and kind of corruptible nature that is the outside world. You've got 2 different kind of worlds, and how they're bleeding into each other. And the main protagonist character is this girl who basically is in the middle of all of it. The film opens up very strong. You've kind of got like a bit of a disagreement with kind of like these different students. Kind of, you know, a bit of a bully kind of character, a character called Little Scar, I think I remember his name correctly, and he's someone who is a part of the tryout kind of, you know, society, this kind of gangster kind of territory, and he has a beef with someone in the school, and it escalates really kind of heavily and really hard, really nastily within the first kind of 20 minutes. You know, this character is basically jumped by tryout members, and he's really kind of nastily beaten and humiliated and smashed against car doors and chased, and leads to his unfortunate accidental death, which kind of shakes up the entire film. Basically, you got a lot of witnesses, a lot of students that are mixed up in this drama, and all of them are being harassed and being, you know, don't go to the police, don't go to the police, don't say anything, and how their goodwill and kind of good innocent kind of nature is being corrupted and being kind of slowly broken down by these kind of much more aggressive, much more nastier kind of characters. And you get a feel of, you know, this world is very much a dog-eat-dog world kind of thing. You know, you can't just go to school and have good education and be well. You are part of different kind of fractions, and a lot of these students that the kind of film tries to go for is saying the idea of a lot of them are joining up. They're not just within kind of drug mules kind of thing, you know, dealing with drugs and kind of selling drugs, but also a lot of the women are dealing with prostitution. These are very young kind of 17-year-old girls, 18-year-old girls, and then being corrupted by the kind of money and power, and being, you know, obviously people that want to exploit these students. And our main protagonist character is stuck within all of it kind of thing. She's someone who is trying to do well, wants to go to school, who think it's very hard hitting. It's very much a nasty film. It's not for the faint of heart. It definitely doesn't go the way you want it to, and it definitely gets a lot more harder to watch as the film goes along. Maybe that's the whole point. Maybe it's the idea of kind of screaming in your face as an audience member, you know, these kids are being corrupted, these kids are being kind of influenced by kind of bad kind of people, and we need to do something about it. That's what the kind of film feels like in terms of the message, in terms of what it's trying to say. I love the dialogue and back and forth kind of, you know, build up between the teacher character, who is someone who's teaching the students, who's being humiliated in the street. Who basically kind of tells kind of Brother Smart, who is the kind of the main villain character of the piece, played by Roy Chung, who plays his 3rd role in this kind of trilogy, definitely his most evil, most nastiest, slimiest kind of character out of all 3 movies, going from a prick to a kind of a hard ass, bit of a nasty character, to a straight up villain who doesn't care about anyone, who's willing to kind of kill people, who's willing to kind of humiliate people, who is arrogant, who is kind of like, I am the young, new, fresh shit, and you're going to take it and you're going to fucking love it and you're going to do what I tell you or else. And a lot of the scenes he's involved with are very horrible, very hard hitting, and yeah, he definitely plays his character really well, and it definitely escalates to that crazy bonkers 3rd act, which I absolutely loved, and I think it definitely needed to be in the film for sure. And I love the dialogue between him and the school teacher, who basically saying, you know, within my world, the outside world, the tryout world, you know, you are nothing, you are, you know, my dominion kind of thing. And I love the fact he kind of, that comes back up later on with kind of a foreshadow within the teacher saying, in my classroom, I am number one, I am, you know, master kind of thing. You respect me, respect my kind of class, my authority. I love the idea of this kind of power struggle between two different kind of areas, which I thought was quite nice. Apart from the initial kind of first 10-15 minutes where the kind of the escalation really kind of kicks up to a high level, the film very much is stuck in the first act for most of the film, and it is kind of well presented, it is kind of well shot, and the scenery is very well put together, and I think the drama is interesting. It definitely gets darker, it definitely gets a lot more mean-spirited. This is very much a dark drama that's really hitting hard and really trying to say something, and I think for the most part, it does work, and I do understand what Ringo Lam was trying to do with this film. You know, it definitely escalates towards the third act. He definitely skips Act 2 and goes straight for third Act 3. Great, it's fantastic, but then it kind of ends very abruptly. You know, I think there's could have been an extra kind of scene or two scenes to kind of wrap up the kind of the ending, because it definitely gets a lot darker in its kind of tone. I think this is the difference between someone like Ringo Lam trying to do something like what Johnny To does. Johnny To, I think, has a lot more kind of finger on the pulse a little bit, finger on the button. I think he knows how to pace a little better. I think he knows how to use cinematography a little better, his music, his visuals. I think something like, you know, PTU or, you know, Takedown or even Mad Detective and some of these other films he has done, these kind of much more aesthetic, kind of slow burn, escalation, pressure cooker movies. I think Johnny To masters that a lot stronger compared to what Ringo Lam does, and definitely Ringo Lam has proven he can do it within City on Fire, and even for the most part kind of Prison on Fire. This film, I think he struggles a little bit to kind of pace it a little better. I think to have a little bit more of a kind of structure. It's fine. You know, the journey is about a teenage girl going through the ringer, going through this kind of really horrible experience, and, you know, being mixed up with these kind of wrong people. Between police force characters and tryout kind of leaders, and, you know, kind of a boyfriend who is part of the two kind of thing, and you know, she's trying to do the right thing, but she's also scared for her life, and she slowly gets kind of broken down and gets kind of angry and gets pissed off, and leads to some very questionable kind of decisions from her behalf that she goes down to, which is kind of tragic. And it kind of definitely reminds me of that kind of a little bit that's got those kind of school sequences from Battle Royale. Definitely has some hard-hitting scenes in it. There's definitely some surprises in terms of the story where it goes. Luckily for the film itself, I think it does work just enough to kind of make it engageable and fascinating to kind of get through. The film very much has a very cynical kind of consequences kind of nature towards it. You know, Brother Scar, who's kind of a little shit in school, who's causing a lot of trouble. His kind of conclusion is very much like a whew kind of thing. You know, Brother Smart, his conclusion is very much a okay, all right, yeah, kind of thing. You know, he definitely has a interesting kind of third act. The main kind of protagonist has a very much a hard time dealing with everything going on in the film. The film leaves you with more kind of questions than just answers, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing. I think it kind of works for kind of the memorability of the film. I don't know about, is it a rewatchable film? Is it a film I'm going to revisit that much? Is it a film that I'm going to, oh, I fancy that film and sit down and watch it kind of thing? You know, it definitely much works with a trilogy kind of format, maybe kind of thing. Maybe starts nicely with, you know, City on Fire and gradually get a bit darker and a bit more nastier as the kind of the trilogy goes along. Maybe it works in that kind of fashion. But as a solo kind of movie, it's very much a step back. Doing some research for School on Fire, I discovered there is an uncut version stuck on VHS. So if you've got an old VHS tape, you've got the full uncut version. There was an international version which is edited down. The Hong Kong Blu-ray release is the longer version, adds a lot more scenes and some of the vibes back in, but not fully the uncut version, which was forever locked on VHS until they do a brand new kind of 2K remaster of the film, which I really hope they do at some point, and hopefully refine that footage and restore the film to its kind of full kind of potential. So yeah, School on Fire, a very interesting film, a very different type of film compared to the first two. Definitely going much more of a kind of Johnny To kind of vibe. Not quite executing as well as I would have liked it to be. It is mean-spirited, it is very nasty, it is very much a dark film. It definitely is more about telling a story about the corrupted nature of kind of influences from gang territory and kind of people that are willing to use teenagers for their own benefit in terms of drugs, in terms of prostitution. It definitely doesn't get any happier, definitely doesn't get any much more fun. Thankfully, the third act of the film does save a lot of the kind of aspects and definitely adds a lot more of a conclusion to some of the characters and some of the beef and the drama going on. Nice to see a couple of characters get a bit of a yes kind of moment for the film. It definitely needed for sure. There's so much going on in the film. If you're curious about the Blu-ray edition I've got, here you go. I have this very unique kind of slipcase, which is quite cool. I quite like it. So there's the front artwork there, which is great. I love the front artwork. There's the back, the spine. Maybe very unique, different type of slipcase that I wouldn't usually see. And same kind of artwork on the back as well. And here's the, you get a postcard as well, which I think is quite cool, which is quite interesting. So yeah, so there you go guys, it's been my Ringo Lam Fire Trilogy review. 3 very unique films. I actually enjoyed all 3, some more than others. 3 Hong Kong movies from Ringo Lam that I can really get on board with, really understand more about him as a director, how he kind of operates kind of his stories and how he kind of likes to present these characters and these kind of in situations, and definitely much is the king of slow burn. I'm going to give him that crown now for sure. I'm very much looking forward to checking out more of these kind of films from his lineup, his filmography. I'd like to know, guys, what are your thoughts and opinions on the format of this video itself? Do you think it works? Do you think it's a bit over stuffy? Do you want to do an individual videos kind of thing? I've got a couple more Ringo Lam movies to check out very soon, in terms of Full Alert, in terms of Prison on Fire Part 2, and Full Contact, 3 movies from Ringo Lam that definitely will be checking out very soon, and definitely a few more I'm going to be seeking out and trying to find on either on DVD or streaming kind of thing.